If I ask you to open your Bibles to the book of Ecclesiastes and start reading, it wouldn't be very long before you would say, "What? These words are in the Bible?" Because you would read rather quickly, "Meaningless, meaningless, life is utterly meaningless." But honestly, haven't most of us said that sometime in our life? You may have to stay late at work for a project because you've been given poor instructions and you're missing time with friends or family. And the person who gave you the project comes back and doesn't thank you for staying late. They just hand you another project with poor instructions again. What's that about? Or you just mopped the kitchen floor and it's not 30 minutes before somebody's shoe is stuck to it because somebody can't keep their OJ in their glass. Or possibly you go into business with somebody that you thought you could trust, but actually it doesn't turn out that way and you lose big time. Why did that happen? Maybe you have a child that you've invested in that you would give your life for, but they're grown up now and they've left, they're far away, and you just get a text now and then and you realize something's just not right, but they're not in your life the way they were before. Was all of that worth it? Leaders come, leaders go. In our world today, stability waxes and wanes, and life is constantly changing, and yet sometimes it feels like we're in this constant cycle of just daily responsibilities and adjustments and challenges. What is that all about? Here we are. We find ourselves in a world that we didn't create, encased in a physical body that we didn't make. We didn't ask to be here. We're here in a world full of physical and natural laws over which we have very little or no control at all. And the question is that I think all of us ask is, how can I live well in this place where I find myself? It's a place also of suffering and a place of injustice and often quite a bit of confusion. Well, the first 24 years of my life, I lived in a godless, dysfunctional home, and I was not loved well. I just think my parents didn't know how to love or how to show it. But as a result, I was a mess. I made plenty of foolish decisions until Jesus rescued me at age 24. And up until that time, I was trying to figure out life. And I came up with those words you read in Ecclesiastes, meaningless, meaningless. Life just seems meaningless. I battled severe depression, irrational fears, all of those things that I think even as Christians, sometimes we look at life, we get discouraged, and we think that way. Have you ever thought to yourself, well, if I just had more, then life would be meaningful. If I could just get out of this rut of the dailiness of life. If I had more money, more possessions, more clout, more time. If I was just pretty enough or smart enough or talented enough, if I was married or if I was single, if I had children or if I didn't have children, life would change. If I had those friends, if I lived at that place, if I got to travel where they got to travel, or if I was loved by, and you fill in the blank, then life would be meaningful. But would any of those things ultimately make life meaningful for you? A study of Ecclesiastes is going to answer all of these kinds of questions, and how I wish I'd known about that book when I was young. It's a treasure trove of teaching us what matters in life and simply what doesn't. And don't we all desperately need to know what matters in this 24/7 crazy, confusing world that we live in today? But just like buried treasure, it takes effort to dig it out. Anything I found that's truly valuable takes effort to unearth its riches. And that's hard for a lot of us because we're used to things being so quick and so easy. So I'm giving you some tools to help you as you go into this study of Ecclesiastes. First of all, we have to realize that we must approach this book with the proper mindset. Ecclesiastes is a journal. Ecclesiastes is Solomon's journal. Now, have you ever written a journal or a diary? It's a recording of your honest feelings as you go through life day by day. And if you were to thumb through an old journal or diary, you would probably find some times when you recorded some very frustrating emotions, some situations that made you angry. And it might even be times that you would read something and you would think, oh my goodness, I'm not proud that I said that. And you maybe can look now and say that was a really distorted perspective. Well, sometimes we live with God more in the picture than at other times. It's probably true for all of us. But then in other parts of your journal, you might find times when you recorded some wonderful prayers, some intimacy with God, some experiences that you learned from. And those are helpful, those are beneficial, they reflect wisdom and not foolishness. Well, Solomon's journal is no different. As you work your way through it, you're going to need to differentiate between the entries in which he's writing from a foolish perspective, which we call under the sun, S-U-N, and then other times when he's writing from a wise perspective, under the sun, capital S-O-N. And we have to learn, and you can, and I'll help you along the way, differentiate between those two different kinds of perspectives. And it's not always easy to differentiate, but as I said, I will help you. And there are lessons in both of these entries. When Solomon is walking close to God, his entries help us understand godly living and what that looks like. And Solomon is giving us a path to follow. At other times, when he's writing from a distorted perspective, he gives us a path to avoid. And both of those are beneficial. And that's why Solomon's journal is part of the divine literature of the scriptures, because both are beneficial. Now also, as you study, remember that King Solomon had resources that practically none of us have. And some of us, we go through life wishing that if we just had that particular kind of thing, then life would be meaningful. But he had the opportunity with his resources to have and to do all of those things. He had all the money that he needed to have these huge building projects. He had all the women that he wanted, all the fame, all of the hobbies, everything that he wanted, you name it. He was able to try that. And you know what he learned? He learned that none of those things really satisfy, not long term. And so what we can learn is that, yes, without God, life is meaningless. But just add those words, with God, then life is meaningful. For those of us who tend to chase after the wind, looking for those things that don't satisfy, well, we all do that. We're tempted to do that from time to time. This is a great book to help us. I desperately needed those lessons, and all of us do. And we can learn. Have you heard the saying, live and learn? That's for us hard-headed people. But that's a very painful way to go through life. This is an opportunity to learn from Solomon what actually satisfies and what doesn't, so that we can learn first and then go out and live. So join me on a journey into Solomon's Journals, the book of Ecclesiastes, a treasure trove of paths to avoid and paths to follow. It will transform your life. May it bless you richly.